In this short sub-lesson, I want to define the technique of reverse engineering and talk about where we can apply RE. We're also going to return and kind of summarize deconstruction and decomposition that we talked about in an earlier lesson. Now, reverse engineering is basically an analysis process, and the goal is to infer the design structure from components with little or no knowledge about the steps involved in the original development. So as you can see, reverse engineering, as we'll talk about later, is closely aligned to what we call black box assessment. Okay, so reverse engineering is a method of a black box approach because we have little or no knowledge. So if we have no knowledge, the reverse engineering is black box. If we have limited knowledge, the reverse engineering is gray box. Okay, so we're analyzing a subject to create a representation or a prototype of the system at a higher level of abstraction. So we can also see this as moving backwards through the development life cycle. As a forensics practitioner, okay, so as an incident handler, an incident response team, often we'll reverse engineer an advanced persistent threat that's been launched against our company through some type of campaign. So, you've got a bunch of users out there, maybe in another part of the world, they've got an exploit kit or exploit kits, and they're issuing a campaign against us, and we can often go through the process looking at the indicators of compromise, looking at artifacts on the system, actions that take place to kind of reverse engineer this actual structured attack. Very common technique. But reverse engineering can be applied to a lot of other disciplines, and we see them listed here, okay? We can reverse engineer code, reverse engineer applications, and that can be done legally, it can be done illegally, okay? You can reverse engineer an application or code for pirating purposes, which would not be legal. It's very popular to reverse engineer websites. This is often done by malicious attackers who want to use a farming campaign, right? Or they're doing URL hijacking. So they have gone and they've created a mock website of, let's say, E-Trade or a bank. So they've reverse engineered a website so they can do clickjacking to redirect a user who mistypes in the address bar and redirects them, or maybe by hacking DNS, uses a farming attack to get them to their website. So they've reverse engineered and they're just using a mock version. Hopefully they're trying to get credentials from you and other PII. We also reverse engineer cloud security for improvement purposes, okay? Reverse engineering the virtual environment that we have. We reverse engineer hostile code and malware. This is done by a lot of our correlation cloud-based solutions like Trend Micro and other teams do reverse engineering to help kind of look under the hood at this malware. That helps us because when the variants of that malware come out, we already have an understanding of that malicious code and that hostile code. It makes it easier for us to recognize, using our countermeasures, different iterations of that malware. Also, we can reverse engineer to find vulnerabilities in binaries, in source code that is either generated in-house or from a vendor. And it's also done for business intelligence. Let's return to the concept of decomposition. We went through an example of this earlier using OpenFAIR of kind of decomposing vulnerability, right? So deconstruction and decomposition is basically a process, and we're looking at it from the standpoint of security and risk. So decomposing risk may be necessary if you don't have enough historical information, enough relevant data from the past, if you don't have access to expert judgment, or you don't have enough existing subject matter expertise. Often a process of deconstruction and decomposition combined with guesstimates and probabilities and calibrated estimation may be necessary, okay? So it's often performed on scenarios to find the true asset and the true value being protected and the security controls that are being used. One of my favorite people is Douglas Hubbard, who has written the books How to Measure Anything in Business, How to Measure Anything in Intangibles, and the #1 book that you've got to have, how to measure anything in cybersecurity. So he says you need less data than you think, and you have more data than you think. Brilliant statement, okay? And so this having less data and having more data kind of feeds into this process we have to go through of decomposition. Returning back to the fair ontology, remember, we can deconstruct and decompose areas like threat event frequency and vulnerability by going deeper and, remember, deconstructing, getting to our threat event frequency by measurable metrics of contact frequency and probability of action of the attacker. And we can break down and decompose vulnerability by looking at threat capability of the threat agent and our security controls measured in probabilities or mathematical terms of difficulty and resistance.